Good morning to everyone. Thanks very much for joining us here today. My name is Michael Kelly. I'm a technical sales engineer at Esri Ireland. And the focus of today's webinar is exploring app integrations with ArcGIS. So to start, I'm just going to run through what I plan to cover today. So to start with, I'm going to actually run through each of the Esri apps and just give you a summary of what they do. There's so much change in how the apps work and what features they have that I find it's always beneficial to update our customers on these different apps and what they can actually do. So we'll start off with that. We'll then have a short poll, which basically just it will ask you what apps you've used before and whether you've integrated them. Obviously, we'll be covering that today and how it can be done. So it may help you if you plan to do that down the line. I'll then go through what we mean by app integrations, and really, when we talk about app integrations, we're talking about how the different apps communicate together, and they do that by using app URL schemes. So we'll be going through the app URL schemes for each of the different apps, and these vary from app to app. Some can be called, some have different arguments that can be passed into the app that do different things. And then finally, we will do a demo on how you actually configure these to work and how they work. It again varies from app to app, so we'll go through the different apps and how these integrations can be configured. So I'll start off by going through some of the Esri mobile apps. The first one that I'm going to go through is ArcGIS Companion. So this was just released in July of this year for the user conference, and it's an app that lets you, that gives you access to all your content in ArcGIS Online through a mobile app. So if you ever tried to do anything really in terms of managing your organization before July, you had to do it through a browser, and it was quite difficult to do on a mobile. So the aim of this is to help any administrators of ArcGIS Online accounts to manage everything through this application. So another focus of this is that it can integrate with some of the other mobile apps. So when we talk about the integration side of things, it's actually built into ArcGIS Companion to integrate with all the other apps. So we can look at how that works as well. Then we have Explorer. This was kind of relaunched last year using the latest technologies that we have in terms of the developer SDKs. But really the aim of Explorer is to allow you to read all of your maps. So it's literally just an app that lets you look at the maps that you have in your ArcGIS Online account. It doesn't let you edit, but it does let you sketch on top of the map. It doesn't require a login to ArcGIS Online, so if you have maps that are publicly accessible, they can be accessed through Explorer without anyone having to log in. And another thing that's become quite popular is offline use of Explorer. So you can now create mobile map packages and share them publicly. So what mobile map packages are they're basically web maps packaged up, so you can use them offline, and that includes everything from the search capabilities to just your general features on your map and your base map. So this is since it's refreshed, it's really become a lot more very popular. We then have Workforce. So Workforce, as its name, as you'd expect from its name, it's a workforce management system, and it's really quite a simple app. There's two parts to it. There's the dispatcher app. This is used by managers for organizing and assigning work. And this is actually web-based, so you just access it through a URL. And then you have the worker app, and this is what the workers in the field use. They can see the jobs that have been assigned to them and update their manager on how those jobs are progressing. Workforce integrates with other apps as well, so we'll be having a look at that later. We then have Collector. So Collector has been around for a long time now, and really it was our first. Well, after ARC, it kind of took over from ArcPad, but it was the first ArcGIS Online focused data collection app. So it lets you read web maps and edit any of the content in it. So you can respond, record, work on and offline, and then sync back into your ArcGIS Online feature layers or databases. There's two versions of Collector. There's the classic version of Collector, which is the one it's actually the only production version at the moment. But this is soon to be replaced, and there's been an ongoing effort over the last number of years to replace this. So Collector is soon to be Collector Classic, and you can expect that by the end of the year on iOS. What's going to replace it is something called Collector Aurora, and this it's actually in beta. It's available in beta now. So if you want to have a look at it, you can just, if you Google Collector Aurora, you'll be able to get onto the beta program and test it out. But it adds a lot of things that have been requested in Collector Classic, but just weren't technically possible with the technology being used. So it's been completely worked from the ground up, and it's going to support stuff such as labeling, arcade expressions, vector-based maps, and offline, when you'll be able to download multiple offline areas as well, which is a big thing. Then we have Survey 123. So when we compare these, this is our kind of second data collection app, but this is more forms based. So Collector is all based around web maps, whereas Survey 123 is all based around forms, and it's become very popular because of its interface and its validation. So you can configure it to have required fields, and you can make sure you can use regular expressions to validate the input data, and you can have conditional logic and various things like that. So for those reasons, it's really popular, and not just for collecting spatial data, but even for regular data then as well. It recently introduced webhook capabilities. So this allows you to automate workflows through applications such as Microsoft Flow and Integromat. So what happens is that when you submit a record into Survey 123 and you send it, it sends another request to something called a webhook, and that allows you to do stuff such as, you know, add records into Microsoft Dynamics or send an email. They're very common requests. They're very common workflows that have been requested, and so webhooks will allow you to do that, and it's definitely going to be something that comes more prevalent in the coming months and years. Survey 123 also allows you to edit existing features through an inbox. So when Survey 123 was initially released, it was only for point data collection, whereas now you can actually edit existing features through the inbox and still have all the form logic in there. And another thing that's come recently is nested relationships. So when I talk about nested relationships, I'm talking about multiple one-to-many relationships. So if you're collecting inspection records about a house, you can have multiple inspections and associated with the same house, but you can have multiple nested relationships. And finally, the final one that's in production is Navigator. So Navigator allows you to use your own custom network. So, well, firstly, it allows you to download entire countries, so networks for entire countries, and use them offline. But it also allows you to create your own custom network. So you create your own custom network in ArcGIS Pro. You create a mobile map package from it, and then that allows you to use your own custom routes through the app itself. And it also integrates with any routes that are created on ArcGIS Online. Now, the next ones that I'm going to talk about are Esri Labs applications. So Esri Labs is an innovation platform for basically new technologies, and they're developed by Esri employers, primarily based around customer feedback. So they're kind of more, it's kind of a test bed for Esri, so we can release apps that we think might be beneficial, but they are non-commercial offerings and they're not supported. But at the same time, customers use them, and we're always looking for feedback. In fact, the likes of Survey 123 started off in Esri Labs and is one of our more popular apps right now. So one of these is called Track to There. So this is basically a smart compass, and basically what it does is it points you to your destination. It uses your direction of travel to tell you in what direction you should go to reach your destination. So it literally just gives you an arrow to follow that gets you to your destination. One that I just found a week or two ago is Quick Capture. So this is a rapid data collection app. So now we have Collector and Survey 123, which are our main data collection apps, but Quick Capture is one that's in Esri Labs at the moment, and it's really for rapid data collection. So if you're in a car and you need to collect things, say along a motorway or anything like that, you literally just, at the click of a button, you just press it and it collects points at those locations. So that's one worth testing out if you think it would be beneficial for you. And then we have Esri mobile apps that are coming soon. So one that was mentioned at the Esri user conference was the location tracking app. So we provide location tracking at the moment through Collector and through Workforce. But what we found is that we actually need an app that is going to be primarily focused on location tracking. So that's what the aim of this app is going to be. So you'll be able to, like, workers will be able to define times to track their location, and this will be stored in a more applicable database. So at the moment, when you have location tracking, it just collects points and puts it into a feature service, but this is going to have a more appropriate database structure in the background. So the next thing I want to do is just, I'm going to launch a poll here. So you should see something come up on your screen now, which lets you reply to the poll. So the first one is really just to check what Esri apps you've used. So you can select multiple apps if you want, and then the second question is to see whether you've integrated any of these apps. Okay, so that's quite interesting. The majority of you have used Survey 123, 92%. 67% have used Collector Classic. So I definitely suggest that you check out Collector Aurora, because it's definitely going to be beneficial for, it's basically going to take over from Collector Classic, so it's definitely worth checking out to see, what way it works, and how it can ultimately benefit what you do at the moment. Yeah, it's quite interesting. So they're the two most popular apps. Workforce is also used a bit, and Explore. So 33% of you have integrated these apps before, and 67% have not. So look, thanks very much for responding to the poll. Much appreciated. So I'll share the results out there with you, so you can see them yourselves. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to move on to, and obviously the title of the webinar is app integration. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about that over the next couple of minutes. So really, when we talk about app integrations, we're really exploring how these apps can talk to each other. So as you can see here in the slide, all the apps can communicate with each other. So the arrows just indicate how they can communicate. So they can all communicate together, basically. They're all connected together. But how they integrate together varies. So apps, it kind of goes into two different things. So you have apps that can be called, and actually all apps can be called. So being calling an app is equivalent to launching the app or clicking on the app icon on your screen on your mobile app, on your mobile. Each app though has its own language or URL scheme. So if you've used URL schemes in ArcGIS Online before to pass in parameters, it's very similar when it comes to the mobile side of things. So the URL scheme defines what arguments can be understood by specific apps. So all apps can be called. Some apps have more arguments than others, and some in fact don't have any arguments. Then only some apps can be configured to call. So for example, Workforce can launch Navigator and pass arguments to Navigator, such as a location to get directions to. But then Navigator can't launch Workforce and pass arguments because there's no capabilities in Navigator to create such a hyperlink. So over the next few slides, I'm going to go into the URL schemes associated with the different apps. So Esri apps use URL schemes, as I mentioned, to call and pass information between apps. So they're hyperlinks with arguments. So if we look at this one here, we have my app name : // So you could, that's kind of equivalent to HTTP : // It's like anything that you have in the web. But instead of having a web address here now, what you do is just pass in your arguments. So what you have to have is the app name followed by a question mark, followed by your first argument and value, and then any subsequent arguments you use an ampersand and then populate the different arguments and values. So for example, if we're looking to launch Navigator, what we do is use this ArcGIS Navigator format to launch Navigator. So just having that in a hyperlink will launch Navigator, but then passing in these parameters allow you to add in functionality. So for example, it's passing in a particular stop and it's passing in a callback prompt. So what this will do is when you launch into Navigator, it will give you an option to it will basically give you a back button that will bring it back to survey 123. Here's a similar thing except for survey 123. So you'll notice the arguments are different. So survey 123, it's looking for an item ID. So in this case, it's looking for the form ID. And this will be 32 characters. I just didn't have enough space there. And then it's followed by the location to center the geopoint in the survey 123 form, followed by a field to populate. So in this case here, it's populating the status field as good. So the apps, they support varying arguments, and you'll see those in the coming slides. You don't have to pass any arguments if you simply want to launch apps. So you can just launch Survey 123 and have it open if you want. But typically it's used to, it helps when you add in arguments because it brings the users into the exact place that you want them. So we'll start off with Trek to There. So it's actually the simplest one. So it uses the ArcGIS-Trek to There : // that's how you launch it. And then it only supports one argument. So it's called stop, and you have to pass in a lat long into the stop. So this compares to Navigator. So you saw Navigator slightly earlier. I have a question in there. Can you use Irish grid in your arguments? In Trek to There, you can't. So typically, you have to provide lat longs into the stops. But in some apps, in fact, in Explorer, which we'll see later, you are able to do that. So you'll see that in a few minutes. So for a Navigator, you have your start location, your stop location, stop name, optimize, and travel mode. So they're your different arguments that you can pass in, and you can have multiple stops that you can pass in through the URL scheme. So you'll see that later actually when I show you something through the companion app. The next app is Explorer. So the URL scheme for that supports an item ID. So what it's expecting in there is a web map or a mobile map package, and then there's lots. This is actually probably one of the most capable URL schemes. So you can do a lot of things like search and define a bookmark to go to, or define a scale or center scale or rotation. But as you see here, as per the question there, you can provide a WKID, so you could push in a specific WKID into there as well, such as ITM or Irish Grid. And you have an option there to turn on markup if you want. So markup allows you to basically write on top of the map if you want. So for example, in the example, actually, I'm using ITM. So the WKID for ITM is 2157, and you can see that the center point here. I think that's somewhere. I'm actually not sure of the location, but they are ITM coordinates, and it will bring you to a specific location based on the ITM coordinates. Then you have Survey 123. So we had a look at this earlier. So some of the arguments are item ID, the field, followed by the field name, and then the value along with the center. So the item ID, you populate the form ID. So it can be easy to get confused as to what item ID it represents, but in this case, it's looking for the form ID. So when you publish a Survey 123 form, it creates a feature layer and a form, but in this case here, it's looking for the actual form ID. And then you can populate some of the fields then as well. So you have the field name, so in this case, parent global ID, and current state. So it's a very common pattern that we have is to go from collector to Survey 123. So you might have or collector or explorer to survey 123. So if you want to use collector to view a web map, but then use survey 123 to collect inspection records about a particular location, then you can use URL schemes to do that. Then you have collector. Again, it's looking for the web map that you want to launch, the coordinates of which you want to center the location. If you want to edit, you can populate attributes into collector then as well. So you have an example then down below as to you know how they would look. So the next part that we're going to go into is how to configure these, and this is the end of the slides. I know we've been on slides for a while now, but we will be just looking at how you set these up now. So the configuration of these vary from app to app, and really it depends on what elements the app is built. So for example, in ArcGIS Companion, there's no need to do anything because it recognizes the different item types, and you're able to launch different apps from that. In Workforce then, through the dispatcher app, you're able to define what parameters are passed between the applications. So we'll look at that first because that's probably the easiest way to do it. Then you have Survey 123. So typically when you do this through Survey 123, you do it through the inbox because you're looking at existing records and you want to, for example, you know, get directions to that location or something like that. We then have Explorer and Collector. These use the same thing, so that they're built on top of a web map, and for that reason, you use a custom pop-up to build in these integrations. So we'll be looking at that in a few minutes. And the one thing about those two, about Explorer and Collector Classic, is that you have to populate lat long values as attributes. This can be a little bit. It means you have to have attributes of the XY of the lat longs and use those attributes to pass into the other apps. But what that means is that they're static, and if you move a point or you add a new point, they don't get added in automatically. So it can be difficult to launch them sometimes. Now with the new collector, because you can use Arcade, you're able to, you don't need to have that long attributes. You can just use Arcade to access the geometries associated with the different features and use that. So we'll start off with Companion. So let me just get out of here. Okay. So you should be able to see my screen there. Now I'll put it into full screen so you can see it a little bit better. Okay. So if you look here, we have various different applications. This here is the Companion app. So if I open up Companion app, it'll first get me to log in. And in fact, I've already logged in. So one of the things in this is that you can just use your Touch ID to authenticate yourself. So this is for viewing all your content in ArcGIS Online and managing your organization. So if I click down here, it will bring me to all my content. And you'll see here I favorited some of my items just so I can show you the different options that are available to you. So the first item that's displayed here is a workforce project. So if I click into that item and click open, it will give me an option to open up workforce for ArcGIS. So it will launch that particular project. So in the background, it's actually using the URL schemes to do that. Similarly, if you have a mobile map package and you click into it, you'll have an option to open it, and you can open it in Explorer if you want. If you have a feature layer, so this here is a feature layer, you have an option then to either open it in a map viewer. So this opens up a web browser and allows you to open the map viewer in a web browser, or the service URL associated with the feature layer. Then you have a form here. So this one here is a Survey 123 form. So it will open up that specific form in either Survey 123, the Survey 123 app, or the browser version of the form itself. And finally, I have a web map. So for the web map, you have options here to open up in Collector, Explorer, or the map viewer. So that's basically what we'll be replicating to some degree. So to do that with Explorer, what I'm going to do is, or to do that with Workforce, I'm going to open up Workforce here. So if I go to Workforce and log in. So it's already recognized that I've logged in already. So you'll see here I have a Workforce project. And so to configure app integrations with that, I just have to click on the settings icon in here. And the app integrations are in the advanced tab. And you'll notice these two, you have options to do location tracking and app integration. What we're interested in is app integration. So I've added in these already. So what this means is that when you open up an assignment in the mobile application, it will launch a specific map in Collector. It will launch a specific map in Explorer. It will bring you to the location of that assignment in Navigator, and it will open up a form in Survey 123. Now, what this lets you do as well is populate specific fields. So again, this is using some of the URL parameters to pass these fields in. So if we want to put in the workforce field ID into, just for the sake of it, we'll put it into address. In fact, there's one there already. So we have the ID field from workforce is going into the building ID field in Collector. So we'll have a look at what that looks like when I show it to you on the mobile. Now, if we look at what this actually does, when you edit any of these, what I'm going to do quick here is I want to show you how this is saved. So I'm going to open the developer tools, and we're going to basically, when you look at the workforce project or update the workforce project, it updates a configuration file which is stored on the web. So if we edit the Explorer one, and actually what we'll do is remove it. So if we don't want to integrate it with Explorer and we remove it, you'll notice I go here, it updates a particular item. And what we want to look at is the parameters that it passed in. So this is actually what the configuration file text for a workforce project looks like. And this is all JSON, so we can look at a JSON viewer and paste it in. And this has everything associated with that workforce project. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is because I want to show you the integrations that are behind this. So you can see the various different URL schemes that are being used here. So in Navigator, it's passing the lat and the long along with a stop name, and then calling back to a workforce. With Collector, it's launching a particular web map. It's going to a specific location, and then it's populating a particular feature service in the Collector. And similarly with Survey 123, in this case, it's actually just it's launching a specific form in Survey 123 along with a lat long. So if I add in integration with Explorer, go into this building inspections web map. So you'll notice this update now The difference is you'll have an additional integration there for Explorer. So there's the Explorer. So it's launching a specific web map and passing in the lat long along with the particular scale. So if we look at that on the mobile app itself, I'll just share my screen again. And so if we go to Workforce here, and I open up that project, these are the various jobs I have. So if I open up one of them and I click on the share button in here, that's basically what we just configured. So it will navigate you to that location. So if I click in the navigator, it will open up Navigator and give you directions to that location. So all these locations are around Ashdown, so they're close to our office here. Basically, it brings you to that location. And similarly, if you're to launch any of the other applications, so let's say if we collected assignment, that will open up Collector and do something similar. In this case, it will launch a web map and it will put down a marker point. So you can see there that it populated location. Yeah, so you can see there that's the location that it passed in. And you can see the billing ID there was populated already. And similarly, the other two options then will bring you to Survey 123 and Explorer. The next thing I want to show you is Survey 123. So I have a survey configured here already. Just going to close up all these. And I'm actually using a beta version at the moment. So this is the some of the things that are coming in the next release are shown here. But if we look here, I have this billing inspection records form, and you saw the 100 there. The 100 marker means that there's 100 existing records in there, which I've downloaded already. So if I go into there, these are all locations around Ashdown. So I can either look at them in list form, or I can click on the map button and look at them in map form. And so the integration for this, if I say go up here to Ashdown, if I open up that form, it already has a point there. So that's an existing point, and we have some read-only attributes here then as well. But if we're using this to, if we want to use this to launch other apps, we can create application links. So these are things that are created through the Survey 123 form itself. So to launch Navigator, what I've done is I've calculated something, which we'll look at the form now in a minute. But basically, these four buttons, they're the launch Navigator, Trek to there, or Google Maps. But then there's also one which calls a phone number. So if I click on the call a phone number, it will ask me whether I want to give that number a call. So I'll show you the form itself that I used for that. So if we go in here, okay, so I have this building inspections form, and you notice all the things that we saw up above. But basically, the app links is all done in this particular group here. So what we're doing is we're we're pulling the lat and the long from the geopoint question. So this is getting the lat long. And then we're using both of those to build up those links. So for example, for Navigator, you can see we're creating a hyperlink, and we're launching Navigator and passing in some parameters. So you'll see the stop here is separated, and then we're using some of the Survey 123 syntax to populate the lat and the long, and it's also calling back Survey 123 then. So after you finish using Navigator, you can click on the top left corner to bring you back to Survey 123. So it's very similar for the different apps. So Navigator, Track to There, and actually for Google Maps, I'm just launching a HTTPS link, but launching including a lat and a long in there. You'll notice I have one in here for a parameter in here for travel mode. So Google Maps supports various different parameters as well, but in this case here, it's launching the travel mode is in walking mode. And then finally for the phone number, it's using the phone number that's associated with that specific point, and we're using a hyperlink here, so we're building some HTML using the concat function in Survey 123, and we're using this tel, we're putting this tel before the H reference, and that just tells the app that it's a telephone number and you can contact that number. So I'll share this form so you can see the syntax that has to be used for, just to make it a little bit easier. I have something here as well that just shows you what these look like. So there's basically different sections to them. So when you see that when you look at this Excel file, I've kind of divided them out so you can actually see how they're broken down. So the comma, basically the concat function takes as many parameters as you want. You just have to separate them by commas. And so in this one here, we're passing in 6 or 7 different parameters to build up that hyperlink. And it's the same for them all, really. So that's how they're built in Survey 123. Okay, so then we want to look at how they're built in web maps, because ultimately web maps are what I use in both Explorer and Collector. So if we look at web map here, what I have here is just we have basically buildings. So these just points represent buildings, and the different colors represent what the building types are, and there are various different attributes. The building IDs, addresses, air codes, when they were built, and the aim of this here is to actually inspect these buildings. So what we're going to do here is build some links that hyperlink into Survey 123 and collect inspections based on that. So you'll see here we have related records. So we can have multiple inspection records associated with a particular location, along with pictures. And there's actually some other related records here as well, but we don't necessarily need to use them today. So if we go into more options here and look at the configure pop-up, what you notice here is I've configured it already. So in the display option here, by default, it actually shows you a list of field attributes, but what we're using is a custom attribute display. So if we click on configure in here, you can see that it's populating some of the attributes that are available and putting them in there. But then you have an option down here to complete the inspection. And so when you click on the complete inspection button, or even the picture, it will launch Survey 123. So to look at that, there's actually some HTML behind that. So instead of looking at it through here, I'm going to just have Notepad here. Okay, so this is all HTML, and basically what we're using here is tables. So to display the attributes as you'd expect, you basically have two columns. So we have the attribute kind of title, which in this case is the billing contact number, and then we're putting in the attribute itself. Now in this case here, we've built a hyperlink around it so you can click on it. Much like in Survey 123, we're doing the exact same thing. We're building the same hyperlink to allow people to basically launch the phone on the computer. So if we go back out here and click on this phone number is a hyperlink, and if I click on that, I have an option to call someone in Skype for Business. Similarly, all this here is just a table view. So if we view them side by side, that's the wrong one. So if we view them side by side, you can see this billing contact number is basically just billing this here, and then this next thing here is represented by this. So each of these is a new row, and then after that we put in a break. So this is a new line, and then we follow it by a hyperlink which links into Survey 123. So in this case here, we want Survey 123 to pass in a specific form. So we wanted to open up this form, and then we want to populate a field in that form with something from collector. So in this case here, we want to, because it's a related record, we want to populate the parent global ID in the child record. And so that's what we're doing here. The field in Survey 123 is parent global ID, and we're populating that using the global ID of the building itself. And in this case here, I've added in a picture. So sometimes it can be easier for users if there's pictures available, or if just to see a picture, and yeah, it just gives a nice visual representation of what it actually does. So I've built in an image here as well, and when you click on the image, it also launches Survey 123. So if we right click on this and click copy link address, what we'll see is that it works as you'd expect. So it populates the item ID, which is actually, it's hard coded into the hyperlink, but then it's passing in the parent global ID. So this is what maintains a relationship between the parent and the child record. So when we click on that, and actually we'll open it up on the mobile here. So when we click on, I'll open up, just close it too actually. So when I open up Collector, now this is the Collector Aurora, so it's the new version. And as it stands, it actually, I have the web map open already, so it launches the particular web map we're working on. So if I click on a point now, it will show the exact same pop-up that we see, and we can click on that, and that will launch Survey 123 and populate the parent global ID. So it opens up the form. You can see the parent global ID here is populated, and you can add in records about this. So I'm going to populate this, and I'm going to say live journal. So obviously you can configure the form whatever way you want. So you probably have more attributes to collect. Okay, let's just leave the picture. So here we go. So I'm in Ashdown here at the moment, and yeah. So if we send that now, so if we click on the tick in the bottom right and send now, it will send that to your feature service, and that will be related then to this record. So if I look, I'm pretty sure I did it on this one here. So I show the related records for the inspection records. Okay, I picked the wrong one, I think. Not this one here, maybe. Inspection records. Okay, so there's the one I collected. Which point that's associated with, I can't remember. But anyway, that's basically how it's launched. So actually, I can probably search 5.5. Okay, so I'm just going to find the record. So I'm going to have, I know what the billing ID here is. So let me just copy that across. Okay, so there's the point I collected, and so we should see related record against this. So there's I actually collected against this twice, but they're the related records associated with it. Okay. Yeah, so that's how you can launch Survey 123 from Collector. Now the other thing I have in there, so if you want to pass in a lat long into Survey 123, at the moment, if you're using Collector, the current production version of Collector, you have to have attributes, lat long attributes in your form or in your web map. But one thing that's coming in Collector Aurora is the ability to use arcade expressions. So when I go into configure my pop-up here, there's an option here to configure attribute expressions. So if I look at, I have one here added already, and what this does is populate it basically gives us back the geometry. So I have a little bit of code in here, and if we click on test, it gives us back the lat long. Now the reason I have a little bit of code in here is because typically you need the location in lat long, whereas if your arcade gives you back in whatever the base map is. So if your base map is in Web Mercator Auxiliary Sphere, then you have to convert it into lat long. So that's what this code does here. So converts from mock sphere to lat long and gives you back the results. So if I add that into, I'll just show a list of field attributes, and that's in there. So if we do that and click on it, we'll see the associated lat long. So you'll be able to do that with the newer version of Collector. I have two questions in there. So the first is there a limit to the number of inspection photos that you can attach to a survey record? And the answer is no, you can have as many as you want. It can be difficult to send them sometimes if you have, a lot of, like, it's like sending an email. If you have a very high resolution photo, it's going to take longer to send, and that might cause problems if you're in an area of low coverage. But for the most part, you can have as many inspection photos as you want. The one thing is that in Survey 123, when you use the inbuilt app, you have an option to reduce the resolution of the pictures so that it helps with that sort of things. And with the linked apps, what happens when you're in an area of poor network coverage? So if you're using Collector, you'd likely have it in offline mode, so you'd have downloaded the area that you're going to already. And if you've done that, then you don't need access to the internet. So basically, you have to have your map downloaded and your form downloaded. And once you have the two of them downloaded, you can submit the records once you get back into network coverage. Now, the one thing I didn't show there was how I created the Survey 123 form. So look, I'm just going to quickly go into this for 2 minutes because I think it's worth mentioning. So in order to do what I did there, I had to create a form based on that parent-child relationship. But in the form, we didn't have the parent at all. We just had the child relation. So we had the inspection records in the Survey 123 form. So to create that, what you have to do is use some functionality in Survey 123 Connect. So when I click on New Survey and go to Feature Service, what this allows you to do is create a form based on an existing feature service. So if we're using building inspection records, we would create it based on this. So I'll just create this quickly and we'll compare the two. This is one that's just generated by Survey 123, and then I'll show you the one that I have. Okay, so let's close this up a little bit. So what Survey 123 does is it just reads the feature service endpoint and basically populates all these things. Now the thing is here, it brings in the repeats, and what you can do is change this. So instead of having them as repeats, you can actually delete this here. So this is the parent record, so we can delete that, and we can delete anything after that repeat. So we probably, in this case, actually, we probably want to. Sorry, I'm just undoing that slightly. So what we do is, yeah, we have the repeat inspection. Sorry, so this is the one we want. So we delete everything else outside of that repeat. And then delete the repeat itself. But we keep the name of the repeat here, so we need that. So we delete everything outside of that, and then go into the settings sheet. And so you see the form ID here. It's built on top of the building inspections layer in the map, but we've removed that, so we have to update that then with the form ID for the repeat section. And once we do that, then it will allow it. So I'll just save that form, go back to Survey 123, and okay, I have something wrong in there. Begin piece. Okay, so I deleted a repeat that I shouldn't have. So now if I go to publish this, it will allow me publish it. It'll recognize that we're using the child records and allow you to publish that form. Now the other thing that you have to do here is add in a parent global ID field. So if we look at the one that I actually created, I've added in a parent global ID field. So I've used the parent global ID field name, and if we look over here, I've bound it as a GeoID field type. And then there's a few other things I've marked as required so that you can submit the form without having that parent record ID. And I've marked it as read only because you don't want people to be able to populate it. It's not something that's really that you'd ever populate yourself. So that's really what I wanted to show today. Hope that was beneficial and you find it useful in terms of how it might give you some ideas and how you can integrate some of the apps together yourself. What I'm going to do now is open it up to yourselves. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to pass them through. I know this won't come in there already. So in terms of the offline use, does that raise issues if several people are working offline who then push back on the repository of ID clashing? So it doesn't. In this case, what we're doing is adding related records. So when we click on a point here and Oh yeah, so I'll just refresh this because I want to show the server 123 connection. So if we look at this here, what this is doing is it's populating into another table. So basically we're just adding to a table, so that's not going to cause problems, and the parent global ID isn't going to change. So yeah, in terms of the syncing side of things and using it offline, it's not going to cause problems. When is Aurora going to be made available? So Aurora is due out, I think, by the end of the year. So you'll see that soon. There's some really nice features in it. Particularly the offline use of it is much improved than what's there at the moment. I'll give you a quick. I think I showed some of it there earlier. But one of the really nice things is the labels. So in the web map, I've configured labels and they appear in the map then. So I only have them at certain scales. But the other thing that's really nice is using Collector offline. You can define offline areas, and it's much easier. So if we go into here, okay, I haven't actually enabled the offline capabilities in Aurora, but I have on this other map that I have. So what it means is that you can add multiple offline areas. If you Google Collector Aurora, you'll find a lot of information on it. This community one is the best one to look at. It'll give you some of the capabilities. It'll also link you out to where you can join the early adopter community. So if you just click here and join it, yeah, you'll be able to get access to the different versions of Collector Aurora. But in summary, it's going to be by the end of the year. For Android, I think it'll be next year, but I think by the end of the year, we're due to have something on Collector on iOS. We have two more questions here, and we'll finish up after these two questions. If you want someone to carry out a review of a survey, example, an annual inspection, and you pass more than just the global ID, so there's an annual inspection of more than 100 fields. Yeah, so you can pass as many fields as you want. So the format for survey 123, if we go back to the slides that we had. But you can pass in as many fields. Sorry, back there. Okay, so there's our survey 123. You can pass in as many fields as you want. So the parent global ID is typically it's the one you need if you want to maintain a relationship. But you can pass in as many other parameters into survey 123 as you want. There may be a certain limit on the number of characters for the hyperlink as a whole, but I think it's over 2,000 characters. So once you maintain that limit, it should be okay. And the other question that we have then is, can you set them up so that there are auto incremental IDs as you capture new points? And the answer to this is no, not really. And the reason for that is because it's very difficult to do that when you're offline. So there's actually a Survey 123 blog on that. That's well worth a read. This ticket number one. This is the one. Yeah. So if you look at this here, it outlines, the difficulties with this. It's very hard to do that when you're trying to maintain offline use, but then also get unique identifiers. But I'd suggest that you have a look at that that blog there, which will give you some further information. Okay, so I think that's all the questions that have come in. Yeah. So look, if you have any questions for me, feel free to email them on to me. I'll be pushing out the different forms that we have, or the different things that the slides and everything that I showed today. So I'll send that out then by email to everyone. So you'll have my email that way, and if anyone has any questions, feel free to come back to me. So with that, we'll end the webinar. Thanks to everyone for joining us here today. I hope you found that beneficial, and we'll talk to you all soon. Cheers.